My husband has informed me that he intends to go on a gaycation with his Bill in Ibiza. How should I handle this? Original post. Hi there, I really wish I didn't have to make this post, but here goes. So me and my husband have been happily married for about 16 years, give or take. We both have stable careers, good family life, and are fairly fortunate despite the cost of living racking the UK right now. We have 2 boys, 15 and 10, and up until this Sunday, thought we had it pretty good. We argue sometimes, of course, but never get too bad, and we have a pretty decent sex life with some exploration, but I won't get into that. Long and short is, on Sunday, just after I dropped our boys off at their friends, my husband asked me if we had the house alone and, more importantly, do I have a minute? I said yes, and he sat me down, then got out this printed poster for some sort of orgy, and started explaining to me the concept of a gaycation. How it's where straight men go to somewhere with sun, sand and booze, and become gay, for the duration of the trip, but that's fine because it doesn't actually count, because what happens on the gaycation, stays on the gaycation. I was just completely silent and mortified, even more so when he said he was looking into booking a trip to Ibiza next year with his Bill, his sister's husband, to experience it for himself. When he finally let me speak, I just said, I need him to be clear with me, is he gay? Because if yes, that's okay, but we need to figure out what happens going forward. I didn't let myself get angry or upset, I was just stunned. He swore up and down how he's not gay and he's 100% attracted to women and of course still loves me and our boys. So I said, well, do you think you're bi maybe? And he got very defensive, saying how I need to drop the accusations and that this is the beauty of the gaycation. It allows straight men to experience gayness without actually being gay and how it's like going to an aquarium. And again, he was adamant he doesn't find men's bodies or genitalia exciting at all, but he needs to experience this apparently. I said, well, I'm really not comfortable because even if he was bi, this would be explicitly cheating on me, and he got angry and reiterated he's not, because that's the beauty of the gaycation, etc. I just had enough and left the room. I ignored him for the rest of the day, but we spoke at tea where I again asked him, why does he want to do this so badly if he's not gay? He said how he's interested in how gay men's lives differ to straight men's and that unfortunately, once the gaycation begins, it's simply impossible for a man to resist and he must surrender himself mind, body and soul, to the gaycation or be destroyed. I really can't put into words how surreal it was, because he was speaking so matter-of-factly and he again insists this is a thing that straight men do all the time and how he's actually doing it a bit late. I just said to him if he has any love for me then he can't go ahead with this, and if he does, the marriage will be dead. We didn't speak anymore after that. Since then he's mentioned no more of it, but somehow, and this is what scares me a lot too, that decision genuinely seems to be tearing him up. He didn't go into work on Monday, and only went in half a day yesterday, because he told them he just felt too ill and he just looks distraught every time I see him. I really don't think he's wholly gay though. I can absolutely believe he's bi, but I'd rather we talked about that in a healthy way rather than this incredibly weird denialism around going on a sex holiday to Ibiza. Has anyone known straight guys to do this and come back and just go back to being straight? Like, surely that can't be a thing that happens. I'm so out of my depth here and I just don't know how to even initiate the conversation. For the record, I also haven't mentioned it to his sister yet. I don't know how I'd even break it to her. Thanks for any help, I just don't even want to think so being able to get this out there has helped even just a little bit. Edit. Wow, this blew up. This has been incredibly sobering and I think I've now confirmed what I already knew to be the case. The marriage is dead, one way or another. In a way I was in denial about that. I have contacted my SIL and she initially screamed at me, calling me a liar and even insisted I was trying to steal her husband. She rang me back shortly after, apologized and admitted she was in deep, deep shock. I have asked my parents to look after the boys and we're going to meet tomorrow to discuss this deeper. I have also texted my husband and told him he will need to make alternative accommodation arrangements, but he will not be sleeping here tonight and a bag will be waiting for him. Not sure if the mods want to lock the post or not, but I think I've got my answers. Thank you for all the kind words, especially Champion Flight who really gave me the good dose of reality I needed. P.S. I see a lot of people asking about the aquarium and at risk of doxing myself. There is a pretty famous aquarium in the UK called the Deep. At the very end you walk through a tunnel that goes underneath the main fish tank, so it's quite immersive I suppose. My husband explained the aquarium thing and that it's a bit like that. You go there and you observe the fishes, you even get a bit up close but you never actually enter the water, get emotionally invested, or become a fish while gay, so it doesn't really count. It was a very bizarre analogy and I pointed out it still makes no sense and he just got more in a huff and how I just don't get it. And frankly I still don't. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Your husband isn't proposing a gaycation. He's proposing cheating on you with men while using magical thinking to pretend it doesn't count. The fact that he's planning this with his sister's husband makes it even more disturbing. His bizarre explanation about surrendering mind, body and soul isn't straight man curiosity. It's someone desperately trying to justify exploring his sexuality while keeping his heterosexual marriage. His depression about not being able to go isn't about missing a vacation. It's about being forced to confront his sexuality without his convenient, "what happens in Ibiza stays in Ibiza" excuse. His meltdown over not going shows how desperately he wants to avoid facing this reality. I read over this multiple times and I guess the worst part is I know you're completely right. OOP should consider about the divorce. OOP. I wanted to avoid the divorce option but, I guess it's the only option, isn't it? Commenter 2. So this is just a thought, but I'm wondering if he was really planning on doing the gaycation or if that was just a cover to try to get you to agree to it. What if the real plan was to get with women while he's down there? That. I hadn't really thought of that tbh. And now the thought terrifies me. From the way he was talking about men, the fact he had a poster for a gay orgy, I mean it's one hell of a bluff surely. Commenter 3. Tell him you are gonna have a straight action while he's gone and you are going to surrender mind, body and soul to other men. Honest to God, if my husband proposed this to me, I'd use his time away to pack up, move out and have divorce papers waiting for him. Update, November 28, 2024. So when I last posted, I'd contacted my husband to tell him he wouldn't be staying at home tonight and a bag would be waiting for him. As you can imagine, we argued. Quite badly. I won't go into the specific details but no, I'm 100% on board with the fact at a minimum he's bi, might even be gay altogether. We've had arguments in the past but I've genuinely never seen him have such a childish tantrum before, screaming about how I just don't understand the gaycation, absolutely despise that phrase now, and insinuating I'm actually homophobic because I refuse to allow him to participate in this cultural exchange with the gay community. A lot of you asked him if it'd be acceptable if the roles were reversed and I did say would it be acceptable if I went and slept with other guys during that week. Like fucking clockwork, he was very angry and offended, saying it's completely different because a gaycation means nothing and what happens on the gaycation, stays on the gaycation etc. So doesn't actually count. Whereas I'd just be straight up cheating? Well, I turned it around on him. No, but you see what happens in Manchester stays in Manchester. It doesn't mean anything, it doesn't count. It's like birdwatching. And I think it got through to him. He went all quiet and then started crying, admitting the thought of me sleeping with another man is destroying his heart but relationships need sacrifices, so agreed, while in tears, that when he goes on the gaycation, I'll get 1 week in Manchester to do whatever I want. He doesn't want me to, but that's fair in a twisted way, he supposed. I told him to get out of my house. Thankfully he left without a fight. I know it's incredibly petty but I also drained the joint bank account, legal in the UK, so he couldn't try to use it against me. About an hour later, I got rang up by his mum, my MIL, who just screamed and screamed at me about being a cheating whore, how I was horrible, what about the kids, etc. When I finally got my composure back I just said ask your son about the gaycation. Obviously at first she got angry but I said no, just ask him about the gaycation, he'll explain, but she called me a fucking joke and hung up. Later on, getting into the evening, I got another phone call from her in floods of tears. She was very apologetic and I told her she doesn't need to be the one to apologize. She was so upset she put Phil on the phone and while he sounded calm, I could just sort of tell he was on the warpath. Again, very apologetic and said he overheard that phrase, asked my husband and husband initially said no it's nothing before explaining how it's a modern thing, men to do, etc., and gave them the same spiel about how what happens on the gaycation, men cannot resist the gaycation, how a man must surrender to the gaycation etc. Phil just said they told him to leave or they'd call the police, don't care where he goes but he wasn't staying there. Husband tried to call me while I was on the phone but I just ignored it and Phil just said he was so sorry for me and they have my corner in this so. That's one thing. Told them to be there for their daughter because it sounds like Bill is involved, husband didn't tell them that. And Phil just said he had to go because he was so angry. Got a text from my husband after the phone call which was all weirdly rambly, saying about how I'd abused the gaycation to destroy his marriage and destroy his life, and again insisted I, and his parents, were homophobic for doing such a thing. Told him we'll talk when he grows up and blocked his number. I took a day off work myself to have the locks changed this morning so that's £500 gone but whatever, at least I know he won't be coming back. I'm going to look into how to proceed with a divorce and then we'll move from there. Oh of course, there's also my brother-in-law. So I haven't yet met with Sil. She was in such a state and has taken this far worse than I have for reasons that'll be clear soon. We're going to maybe try tomorrow, but we did talk over the phone and I eavesdropped on the conversation with her husband where she put her phone on speaker and I went on mute. Her husband got home earlier, she made him come home, told him there was an emergency, and just said to him, "Can you please explain what a gaycation is?" She told me afterwards she was praying he'd look confused, or just be like what, or anything like that. But instead he just sat her down and explained that a gaycation is a new thing where straight men go to gay hotspots and participate in gay sex acts, but it doesn't count because there's no investment and because what happens on the gaycation stays on the gaycation. He said it's like writing down angry thoughts and putting them in a drawer. You never have to see them again. Whole time, SIL is in tears as he just calmly bats off the same points my husband did about how it doesn't count, and he even did the whole thing. It's impossible to resist, you must surrender or be destroyed shit. I seriously think they must be speaking to a dominatrix or something. Are there even male doms? Because surely neither of them are that into this to actually make that up on their own. I really don't want to go into what was discussed, for her sake, but it did become very apparent to me that the bill is into sissy hypno porn and at times conflated that with the concept of a gaycation. There was this utterly surreal moment where SIL is just trying to wrap her head around this while also in floods of tears, and he explains, so genuinely, so matter-of-factly, that for most men, the gaycation is either a one-time or annual thing, but some men go on the gaycation for years, and others simply never return, because they use hypnosis and mind control to be totally feminized, into a state of permanent pseudo-gayness. She said in disbelief, surely if you're taking it up the arse willingly because you want to, that makes you gay. And he said no, because that's the beauty of the gaycation. You can do all this gay stuff but you don't interact with the wider gay life experience. She asked him if the sissy stuff is what he wanted and he said, not on a long-term basis, and was adamant this is something all straight men do, but she wouldn't get it because she's a woman. Then there were more insinuations of homophobia. Well, that marriage is dead too, I suppose. The whole ordeal ended when she said to him he has a choice to make, and he said, no, he doesn't need to make this choice because the beauty of the gaycation is that it allows him to keep his marriage because it doesn't count. She said that's not the choice is whether he's leaving the house that night or she is. Only good thing he did was leave. Me and SIL spoke about it after that and I'm just, still utterly stunned. I understand she's gone to her parents for support. What exactly did we do to have our lives destroyed in such an abrupt, bizarre, embarrassing way? Per some advice, I'm going to look at devices and bank statements to see if I can find any definitive proof of cheating. After that, I suppose I'll figure out how I tell the boys why their father won't be coming home. Edit. Spoke to another SIL. My husband's family is older sister, him, younger sister, original SIL, and gave her a skimmed-down version of it. She asked her husband, and thankfully he was deeply confused, but then mentioned about 2 years ago at a birthday party, he was approached by my husband and Bill about signing up to some online boot camp around BDSM cross-dressing. He assumed they were taking the piss out of him, so told them to fuck off and never really thought of it again. The fact that this has been going on for that long is making me want to throw up. P.S. For the poster who said about divorce options, I'm actually going to look into adultery because plain and simple that's what this is. Top comments. Commenter 1. Your husband and Bill are deep in a shared delusion that's destroyed 2 families. Their identical talking points about surrender and destruction prove this was coordinated. They're not just planning to cheat, they're already involved in some online community that's warped their thinking. The fact that they both instantly launched into the same script about gaycations shows this isn't spontaneous. You made the right call, draining the account and changing the locks. Their attempts to flip this into accusations of homophobia show how desperately they're trying to avoid responsibility. The identical language, the bizarre aquarium and bird-watching analogies, the talk of surrender or be destroyed. They're in some online echo chamber that's completely divorced from reality. When your husband agreed to let you have a Manchester week while crying, he revealed the whole lie. He knows exactly what this is, cheating. He just wants permission to do it while denying you the same. The talk about hypnosis and permanent feminization reveals just how far this goes. Get a lawyer, protect your assets, and document everything. This will get worse before it gets better. Focus on protecting yourself and your children, because they're too far gone in their shared fantasy to see the destruction they're causing. What a pathetic hill for 2 men to die on. They destroyed their marriages, traumatized their families, and alienated their parents. All while insisting none of it counts, because they made up special rules about it. They want to cheat without consequences, and they've found an online community that validates this fantasy. Am I the asshole for eating at a hospital cafeteria roughly once a week? My sister and family are telling me it's wrong. Original post. Okay, hear me out. I work just a few blocks away from a hospital, and get there pretty quickly by bicycle. Their cafeteria is quaint with good prices. So usually once a week or so, I'll go there for lunch. The food isn't what I would call amazing. But they have a nice variety from time to time. The staff even recognize me and are always pleasant. They don't mind that I'm just there for lunch. And it's far quieter eating there than at any local restaurant. I'm on the spectrum and don't like loud noises. So the quiet lunches in this place are a godsend for me some days. Recently my sister found out I've been eating at the hospital. And went off on me over how hospital cafeterias are only supposed to be there for people who are at the hospital because they need to be. I retorted that I was giving them business, and it's not like I was taking food out of the mouths of patients, and I only went once a week. So what was the big deal? But she still insisted I was wrong. Then she got our parents involved, and they're siding with her. They are telling me I should only be eating at the hospital if I had an actual reason to be there. I told them they were all crazy, and it was just normal food that I was paying for. But now, because neither they or I are backing down, I'm torn. AITA for going to eat lunch in a hospital cafeteria once a week just because I work nearby. Edit. Thank you for all the comments. I will make this a hill to sit on if I have to now. I really apologize for the length of this post, but writing down all the details took way longer than I thought. And this situation was downright crazy. I never thought my sister would do something like this. Not too long ago 23 minutes, posted an RAITAH for advice because my parents and sister were angry at me for regularly eating in a hospital cafeteria because it's close to my work. I enjoy the peace and quiet there on the days I do show up to eat. But this situation escalated so radically that I can't believe something so dumb actually happened. My sister did the pettiest thing she's ever done to me. And for completely undeserved reasons too. When my sister found out I was eating at the hospital cafeteria, she went off on me over how that food is just for people who are at the hospital because they need to be. We ended up in a big argument about it in which I told her it wasn't like I was taking food from the mouths of patients. Then she went to our parents to get them on her side like always. And they immediately sided with her just like I thought they would. They backed her up on how the hospital cafeteria was not a place to go eating casually. And we had a big argument. They spent days hounding me and telling me I was wrong and demanding I stop. So I went to Reddit. And here I learned that not only was I not doing anything wrong, but it's a very common thing for people to go eat at hospital cafeterias just because they like it. I hoped the situation would just fade away. But a few days later, my sister called me asking if I had stopped eating at the hospital. I said no. And then it started all over again. My parents then called me fuming and acting like I was supposed to stop going because they said so. I reminded them that I don't live under their roof anymore, and this is exactly the kind of reason why I moved out. They take my sister's side in almost everything. They huffed and puffed about it. This time the fight didn't stay at home though. Other relatives found out because my sister tried to broaden her support. She was so dead set on enforcing her will upon me, that she went looking for help from other relatives. But our parents were the only ones on her side. And my uncle personally admonished my parents and her over the phone for it once I told him what actually happened. He told them they were only siding with my sister because she's their favorite. And they're terrible parents for ever playing favorites to begin with. Then my cousin went to eat with me at that hospital cafeteria, and said he'd like to go there once a week too, as he also works nearby and bicycles everywhere. We've run into each other at lunch there once already since then. He was actually rather pleased to find out the food was made healthier than most other places. He's a bit of a picky eater. So this place is kinda like his new lunch hangout. And my sister got even angrier after finding out there were other people in the family eating at the hospital now too. Once outed, my parents backed down due to embarrassment. They apologized to me, and gave me some malarkey that they honestly thought eating at a hospital was weird, and that they felt like they just needed to defend my sister. I told them they'd been placating my sister for so long, that it's all they do whenever she starts something with anyone. She's been treating me like a condescending control freak and a bully since we were teenagers, even though I'm older. And they just kept enabling that. But I won't put up with it anymore. My parents ended up conceding, and apologized. Then they made my sister apologize to me too. And I could tell she hated every second of it, because she tried to speak through her teeth at first. Later on my parents invited me to dinner as another form of apology. But it felt more like a show to look good to the rest of the family, because they told everyone about it before it even happened. The dinner was great, I can't deny it. My parents had cooked a turkey. Arguably one of my favorite things to eat. I love the drumsticks slathered with gravy. Yeah, I'm kinda a pig when I eat them. But I can't help it. My sister always thought it hilarious. And was one of the few things I didn't mind her laughing about. So I thought nothing of why she was so giggly at dinner. Later after the family dinner, I noticed that my bike was missing. I'd parked it in the backyard out of sight. But it was just gone. I freaked out because it's my only mode of transportation. My parents panicked a bit with me. But my sister seemed just the opposite. She actually looked happy and was still giggling. I immediately suspected her, and she played innocent. She even gave the "I can't believe you'd think I'd do something like that" line. I already knew she's extremely petty. But this was a whole new level of it for her. So I said that I was gonna go over to the neighbor because I know they have cameras, and they'd have seen what happened. And then I'd call the cops. My sister suddenly looked panicked, and I got mad and said I knew it was her. And demanded my bike back. She started crying and saying she didn't do anything. And our parents were immediately taking her side while scolding me for daring to accuse her. So I had enough and said I was going to the neighbors to ask to check their cameras, and then I'd be calling the police. My sister finally fessed up and called me to come back. The looks on our parents' faces after they'd just defended her were priceless. My sister said she was just so angry at me for having made her apologize for something she still believed she was right about. So she planned to have a couple of her friends come and grab my bike during dinner. She said her friends were in a minivan with it just down the street. She then started saying that I couldn't call the police on her anyway, because I'm her big brother. Our parents backed that up too. But I pulled out my phone and started marching outside again. They ran after me with my sister begging and crying for me to stop. I called her a brat. And then I told my parents I couldn't believe they were still defending her when she was acting this way. Our parents finally hit their enabling limit with her and told her to make her friends bring my bike back immediately. She got on her phone while sniffling and called her friends up. But then she suddenly ran into her room to talk to them. I couldn't hear a thing she said through the door because it was all in whispers. And our parents looked very worried too. My sister would never have willingly admitted she had my bike stolen. She just kept sobbing that it was only a prank over and over again. And she also kept using the excuse that it's just a cheap bike anyway. I bought it used some months ago for $50. But it's in great shape, and it's my main mode of transportation. My sister kept looking at our parents to back her up. And that time they just couldn't. So she just slumped down in a chair hugging her knees and waiting with the rest of us. My sister looked increasingly freaked out the longer her friends took to bring my bike back, and was repeatedly texting them. Even though my sister said her friends were just down the street, it took them roughly an hour to bring my bike back. They finally pulled up in the minivan with my bike shoved in the back. And it was completely soaked and all muddy. Like it had just been pulled out of a wet, muddy ditch. The bike is a 70C, so it's too tall for either of them to ride. So they just drove right up and stole the bike by dragging it into the van as fast as they could before taking off. I say they stole it because I was almost certain the moment my sister had told them to dispose of my bike. Had I not pointed out the neighbors have cameras, I may not have gotten it back. When her friends did finally arrive, their legs were all muddy and wet nearly up to their knees. They both begged me not to report them to the police for taking the bike. I asked while recording them to tell me the truth, and pointed out the neighbors have cameras. Did my sister want them to get rid of my bike? They broke down and said yes, my sister wanted them to take the bike and dump it in a pond a few miles away. And they had to go back and get it when they realized they were caught. My bike had been nearly completely submerged in muddy water. Thankfully I didn't have many added accessories on it other than a detachable headlight and my water bottle. But the water bottle was missing. I wasn't surprised by what my sister's friends told me. And I had them tell our parents too. They laid into my sister till she was bawling on the floor, kicking and pounding like a toddler. I had never seen my sister act that way since she actually was a toddler. And I found it mortifying that she was still like this on the inside. Then she shut herself in her room. Her friends were banned from ever coming to my parents' house again. Then my sister was forced to come out of her room by our mother, and make another big apology to me. Our father then forced her to wash and oil my bike from stem to stern under his supervision while I took apart the headlight and cleaned it out to dry it. By the time my sister was done, it was dark outside. She glared at me like I was the devil when she came back to the house. But our parents shut her attitude right down, and said they've never been more embarrassed by her in their lives. She went back to crying in her room. I had a very frank discussion with my parents about my sister's childlike behavior. And how it stemmed from their spoiling and enabling. I said I couldn't believe I had to be the voice of reason. But the fact that she was on the floor crying like a toddler, kicking and pounding, showed that she's still mentally a child because of them. And they kept making me the scapegoat when she screwed up, so she barely knows any sense of accountability. For once they didn't argue with me about it. And then my father silently drove me and my bike back to my apartment with his SUV. He also gave me some money to replace my bike's missing water bottle before we parted. My sister and her clique used to harass me a fair bit whenever we ran into each other. They made fun of me as a group whenever possible. And I usually just ignored them because they bored me. And that really seemed to tick them off. But after the bike incident, I got sent numerous messages from numbers I didn't know cussing me out for making my sister cry over a silly prank. Knowing her, my sister probably fed everyone she knew a very different story on what happened. I texted lengthy replies of what actually happened, and even stated I have recordings of her friends admitting the truth. Some people at my sister's college found out what actually went down. Maybe from my texts, maybe her friends spilled the beans. But it embarrassed my sister so much she came home having a crying tantrum about how people there were calling her and her friends bees and bike thieves. I may not have gone to college. But I know students who need them are very protective of their bikes. A lot of them live on shoestring budgets after all. My sister said someone even joked that they shouldn't leave a bike around her, because it might just disappear if she had to apologize to anyone. My sister ended up so upset that she refused to leave her room for 3 days to have her pity party. My parents called me up to try and turn everything on me again. I reminded them about the discussion we had days before, and that they needed to stop babying her, and let her deal with the repercussions of her own actions. If she fails her classes again, it's because she's not trying like she should be. Then I went off on them. We were just looking for someone to blame to make her feel better. She made the problem. Not me. And I wasn't gonna be the one they make the scapegoat anymore. My sister is an adult, and she needs to act like it. They sounded defeated, and then apologized before ending the call. Looks like they were genuinely hoping I'd just sit back and take the blame so my sister would get better. But I never will again. Now my parents are trying to pretend this all never happened, and my sister as well as her clique are avoiding me at all costs. Which I suppose is fine with me. Because I don't want any more drama. But the next time something like this happens, I won't take it from them. TLDR. My sister made a big deal of me eating at a hospital cafeteria, and then had her friend steal and dump my bike just because I made her apologize to me. Now she's being ridiculed by everyone. Relevant comments. Aquavanatus, I remember your post on AITA. Your sister is that bratty that she would have her friend steal your bike and ruin it just to make a point? And, your parents don't see a problem with it? What did the rest of your family say about this? Oh, they were furious with them. I didn't include details about it because the post was already way too long, but my aunt and uncle gave my parents one hell of a dressing down, twice. The first time in person the day after the bike theft happened. They had a long discussion with my parents over how their babying has prevented my sister from growing up. And she wouldn't be able to function without them if she never learns to become an adult. The second time was after my parents called me to try and make me take blame when my sister locked herself in her room for 3 days. I talked with my cousin that evening when we met up to have dinner together. And he told his parents, my aunt and uncle. And they called my parents to ask them what the hell. Then told them that they were beyond ashamed of them that they still tried to make me the scapegoat. And that they didn't care if old habits die hard. It's gonna stop. Let's just say my sister wasn't the only one crying anymore. No one has told me anything about what's going on with my sister at her college for a while. And she's avoiding me. My parents have also not spoken to me since that call. So I have no idea what's going on at their end. My dad refused to spend Christmas with my bill, and now my mum is blaming my wife for everything. What should I do? Original post. This is a throwaway account as I have work colleagues on my mind that I don't want to know about my family drama, and spelling will be rubbish as I'm fuming right now. Obligatory names have been changed. So for the backstory, I 36F and married to the love of my life 36FK. We met when we were 17, she was out and proud whilst I was still in the closet, so we didn't start dating until I came out at 21. We got married in 2019 and have an adopted 4-year-old son Jack. This comes in relevant in a minute. My sister 27F Sarah has a long-term boyfriend 28M Steve who the family cannot stand. They've been together for 8 years and the whole family has hated him from the first time we met him. He is rude, obnoxious, arrogant and all in all a crappy human being. He's also someone that likes to claim that he is just honest, but if someone is honest back to him he flips out and sulks like a toddler. In fact, my toddler is better behaved than him. He isn't abusive to Sarah and doesn't direct these comments towards her, it's just the rest of us. He's actually a good partner to her and treats her well, which is his one redeeming quality. My dad and Kay hate him the most and will do anything to avoid him at family gatherings. Kay usually just ignores him and brushes off anything he says to her as she doesn't like conflict. However, there have been a few occasions that she has said something back, but it's usually said in a joking manner which amuses my dad to no end. My mum is a peacekeeper and will do anything to avoid drama, so she just changes the topic whenever he starts, But she and my grandparents all hate him just as much as the rest of us. Sarah is the only one that obviously doesn't hate him. Our son's birth mother Tess was Kay's best friend, who sadly died in 2021. This was a real shock as she had an underlying heart condition that she didn't know about and simply went to sleep one night and never woke up. Jack had been left alone in his cot all day screaming for his mom before Kay got worried that Tess wasn't answering her texts and went to their house to see if she was okay. She found Jack in his cot and Tess in her bed. We adopted Jack as no one in Tess's family was in a position to take him in. We raise him as our own, but he knows who Tess is. Obviously this is a very sensitive topic for Kay as it was so traumatic for her and Jack. Now, on to what happened last weekend. It was the anniversary of Tess's death on Saturday, so Kay, Jack and I went to visit her grave. Kay is always quiet after going to see her, and this time of year is especially hard for her. On Sunday we had a family gathering at my parents' house. These happen every couple of months as just a catch-up for everyone. At first nothing was out of the ordinary. Kay and my dad were off to the side talking as usual, only I could see that Kay was obviously struggling, so my dad and her went for a walk so she could clear her head. This is something they have done before, so nothing too unusual. However, Steve had an issue with this and asked why they had left and why he wasn't invited to walk with them. I explained that Tess and Kay just needed a minute. This wasn't good enough for Steve though, and he said she should have gotten over it by now. At this my granddad, who is naturally a very quiet guy, said that his best friend had died over 20 years ago and he still had days where he missed him so much it hurt. You don't just get over something like that. Steve shut at that. Kay and my dad got back and she was in a much better mood. We all sat down at the table for our late lunch and started chatting. Everything was fine at first until Steve started trying to butt into Kay's conversation with my granddad. When it was obvious that they weren't going to include him, he very loudly stated, "This is bullshit. She's getting all the attention of everyone because her friend died 3 fucking years ago. Get over it for fuck's sake, we're all sick of hearing about it." The whole table went silent and I took one look at Kay and knew she was about to go off on Steve. Only it didn't happen the way I thought. Rather than exploding at him, she looked at him very calmly and said that her and Granddad weren't talking about Tess. They were making plans to take him to the Christmas markets, but if he wants to be a dick then no problem. She then went on to say to him that everyone in the family hates him because he's a toxic narcissistic fuckwad. That whenever he can't come to a family gathering the whole family is much happier. That there is a reason he has no friends and that his own family can't stand to be around him. That reason is that he's rotten from the inside out and that Tess may have only been on this planet for 32 years, but she made a bigger impact on people that he would have if he lived until he was 150. That her funeral was rammed with people because she was so loved, whereas he'd be lucky if anyone other than Sarah was at his. After that, she got up and went to the back garden and I followed her. A few minutes later my dad came out and said that he'd told Sarah and Steve to leave. We went back inside and Kay apologized to everyone and said she should have just kept her mouth shut. Everyone other than my mom told her what she had done was right and it was about time someone told him. My dad then found it hilarious that a lesbian had been the one to tell him straight, which lightened the mood a lot. We spent the rest of the afternoon there before going to pick Jack up from Kay's mom's house as she had had him overnight on Saturday for us. The reason I'm making this post is that yesterday I got a call from Sarah saying that she and Steve wanted an apology from Kay or they weren't going to Christmas. When I reminded her that we wouldn't be at Christmas either as it is our year to spend it with Kay's mom so it made no difference to us, she got really upset saying that she wanted an apology because Kay was way out of line. I said she wasn't and that I wouldn't even contemplate asking her to apologize because I agreed with everything she said and so did everyone else there. She ended the call and I just went back to work. Then today my dad called me and asked if Kay's mom would mind a few more for Christmas as he was refusing to spend it with Steve, so he and my granddad needed someone else to go. Apparently after Sarah had called me she called mom and started ranting and my mom had told my dad to get Kay to apologize, which he said no to, and they had an argument and my dad has now decided that he's done with Steve even if that affects his relationship with Sarah. He's not having it anymore. My mom wants Sarah there, and she won't go without Steve, so my dad is going somewhere else and my granddad agreed with him. I texted Kay's mom and she said they were welcome, so now my mom is furious and saying that my dad and Kay are ripping the family apart. So basically this has turned into a shit show. Kay has said she will apologize if I want her to, just to keep the peace, but I've told her no way. Everything she said was true. I just don't know where to go from here, and the people in my life all hate Steve so much that Kay could have physically attacked him and they would all still think she is in the right. So that's why I'm asking internet strangers who might have had to deal with difficult family members. What can we do to get into a place where we can be around each other amicably? I'm struggling to see a way right now. Wow, didn't realize how long this got until I went to post it. Sorry about that. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. For things to be peaceful, both parties need to want it. Kay did nothing wrong. I wouldn't ever spend another moment with Steve. I would let Sarah know I love her and will see her anytime, anywhere, but I'll never see Steve again. If you have one guest that basically wants to shit out on the holiday table, there's no path forward with them. OOP. If it was just Sarah upset, then I wouldn't care, but it's my mom. She tries so hard to keep the whole family together and she is devastated by what's going on. If it wasn't for her, then Sarah could go take a running jump for all I care right now. Sarah. This is the issue, that Steve and Sarah don't see anything wrong in what he's done. It was just him being honest. I would be happier for her to apologize if Steve and Sarah admitted that what he said was in the wrong as well. Without that, I'm being stubborn about it. My dad told Kay he will fall out with her if she apologizes, as she did nothing wrong. There was no screaming or shouting, she said it very calmly. I feel like I'm stuck between making my mom happy and doing what I believe to be right. To another commenter. My sister doesn't see anything wrong in what he says, as he's just being honest, but loses it when someone is honest back. I don't understand her anymore. Mom. Taking the high road and rising above it have been two of my mom's favorite things to say to us over the years. I just feel like enough is enough. He crossed a line this time that he can't come back from. I especially don't want my son around him when he's saying things like that about Tess. To another commenter. If I hear my mom say take the high road one more time, I'm gonna scream. I'm sick of the high road. I've been on it for 8 years. I'm happy on the low road now. Later that day. OOP. Well, I've just found out that my granny and pa, my mom's parents, are going to my uncle's for Christmas and Steve is not invited, so it looks like it's going to be just Mom, Sarah and Steve for Christmas this year. How OOP feels about that? Vindicated, as my mom is like her parents. They're all peacekeepers, and if ever they have had enough, then it just shows that he's not just stepped over the line, he's ran right past it. Mom. Kay's mom has already told her that if she changes her mind, then she is welcome at her house. Even if it's Christmas morning, she is more than welcome. Obviously Steve and Sarah aren't invited at all, but it's good that my mom has the option at least. Later reflection. I have realized that he has been trying to target Kay and my dad's relationship, as they're very close. They have traveled all over the country visiting class car shows together, which Steve has tried to get in on. But he doesn't know anything about cars, so there's no point in him going even if they did like him. I actually think he's been trying to push Kay and I out of the family so that he gets my dad to himself, even though my dad can't stand him. Update post. Hi, I know how much this community loves an update, so I thought I would give you one, as things seem to be sorting themselves out, kind of. After I wrote my last post, a few things happened in the next couple of hours. First thing was that I spoke to my grandparents on my mom's side. They were there when this all happened, but they're like my mom and just constantly try to keep the peace. That's where she gets it from. They were supposed to be spending Christmas with my mom this year, but had changed their minds and decided to spend it with my uncle instead. They have made the decision to not be around Steve either, as he causes too much drama. They asked if they could come and see us and Jack on the 23rd before they head off to my uncle's, which I happily agreed to. This really surprised me and it outright shocked my mom, as like I said, they are the biggest take the high road type people I've ever met, but even they'd had enough. The next thing that happened was my dad called to let me know that Steve and Sarah had now decided that they want Kay to make a public apology in front of the whole family and admit she was lying and that the family loves Steve. He was laughing as he told me this and called them delusional, so any small chance of a superficial apology went out the window. The third thing that happened was Jack getting home from the after-school club with a recorder that I'm sorely tempted to shove up the teacher's backside. So all in all, it wasn't a great day. Through talking to people on here, I also realized that Steve has been trying to push Kay and I out of the family. Organizing trips that he knows we would be able to go on. We wouldn't have gone on them anyway, as a weekend away with him sounds worse than a paper cut to the eyeball, and him constantly trying to get my dad away from Kay whenever we are all together. I think this is because he is jealous of Kay and Dad's relationship, as they're very close and go on trips to classic car shows several times a year together, usually with my granddad as well. Anyway, things went quiet for a few days until the weekend. Our town has a big Christmas fair that runs from November through December, and we always go to it with Mom, Dad, Granddad, and Kay's mom. We decided to cheer my mom up a bit to go on Sunday and then out for dinner after. My mom was told that if Sarah or Steve showed up then we would all leave, and she promised they wouldn't be there. Things were a bit awkward at first, but settled after a while. At one point Jack got my mom and dad to take him on the giant snow slide, and as my mom walked back over to us she had tears in her eyes. I pulled her to one side to see what was going on, and she said that whilst waiting in line, Jack had said he was happy Uncle Steve wasn't here. When my mom asked why, He said that Uncle Steve was a bad man. My mom tried to say that he wasn't, but in typical stubborn 4-year-old fashion, he had argued and said he learned in school that people who say mean things all the time are bad people, and Uncle Steve said mean things all the time, so he was a bad man and that he didn't like him. There had been a case of bullying in his class a few weeks ago and the teacher had done a lesson on how wrong bullying is, so I think that's where this came from. This finally broke through to my mom. If even a 4-year-old can see what a horrible prick the man is, then she had to as well. She said that she felt stuck because she hated Steve and agreed with everything that Kay has said, but she loves Sarah and doesn't want to isolate her. I told her I would always be there for her, but I wasn't putting myself, Jack or Kay through being around Steve again, and she needed to think about what she wants. Not what I want or Dad or Kay or Jack or her parents or Sarah or Steve, but what she wants. She went quiet and then said that Kay's mom had told her she was welcome at hers for Christmas if she wanted to, and that she could decide on Christmas Day if she wanted. Kay's mom would save her a plate. We went back to the group and a little while later I saw Mom and Kay's mom having a deep discussion whilst walking behind us. Neither will say what they talked about, but Mom seemed a bit happier after their talk. They have also been talking since, as yesterday my mom told me that she will be coming to Kay's mom's for Christmas and they've been talking about going shopping together next week. When Mom told Sarah after calling me, Sarah predictably lost her mind and said that Mom was choosing us over her. My mom told her she was choosing to have a good Christmas rather than being belittled and made miserable, all for the sake of Steve and his so-called honesty. Sarah then called me and asked if I was happy that I'd won. She then did the unforgivable and used a few homophobic slurs towards me and Kay and called Jack the bastard of a whore. I ended the call, blocked her everywhere, and then let my family know what had happened and that I never wanted to speak to her again. They're all as appalled as I am, and my granny, Mom's mom, called Sarah and apparently told her she was dead to her as she won't have a bigot in the family. Sarah has been trying to reach out to apologize because she knows she has stepped over the unforgivable line, but I've just kept blocking the fake accounts that she's making on IG. Steve tried reaching out to my dad after this, and when he eventually answered, Steve tried to say that Sarah was just angry and didn't mean it. According to Mom, Dad ended up giving him a verbal lashing and told him that he was the worst thing that had ever happened to Sarah and our family. My dad has told Sarah he is disgusted with her, but will be there for her if she leaves Steve. Until then, good luck. Mom has gone low contact as well, but wants to keep the door open so that Sarah is not completely isolated. I had a few people saying that Steve may be abusive towards Sarah, but I really don't think he is. He usually acts like a dick when the attention isn't on him. He knows that when he says dickish things, then all the attention is on him and he revels in it. After Sarah's outburst, I just think that they're both toxic and feed off each other's toxicity. She lets him get away with the things he says because she gets pleasure out of watching us all bite our tongues and keep quiet. So, Mom's angry, Dad's angry, our 3 grandparents are angry, extended family are angry, and Kay is being my rock, but I can tell she's really angry about what she said towards Jack. I'm just sad and done with it all. At least now I know what she really thinks about Jack, Kay and myself, so there's that. Not the perfect update, but we move on. It will be nice this Christmas to have both sides of the family together for the first time and not have to worry about Steve being a dick, but I'm sad that this is how my relationship with my sister has ended. I'm trying to get into the Christmas spirit, but it's a tough one right now. The only things that make me smile are Kay and Jack being goofy idiots to cheer me up. However, the recorder can go to hell. I curse whoever invented the thing, like seriously, fuck you. Thanks for all the support in my original post and opening my eyes to a few things. Maybe internet strangers are the way to go for advice after all. Hope you all have a good Christmas/holidays. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter, I don't think the dickish Bill and Sarah saga had concluded. I'm glad you'll have a peaceful Christmas in theory. I just think the pair of them are not convinced yet that they're shut out. OOP. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and turn up to my parents for Christmas, but we won't be there so they won't get far. As long as they stay away from me, Kay and Jack, then I don't care what they do. Commenter. Many small children playing recorders with more enthusiasm than skill follow Steve everywhere. OOP. This just made me laugh a little too hard. Thanks for that. Editor's note. Wasn't sure whether to mark this one as concluded or ongoing. I've tentatively marked it as ongoing, but I'm happy to change it. Am I the asshole for calling my father's wife a creep after she crossed boundaries with my daughter? Original. My 32F father, 60s, has been married to Sasha. Fake name, 40s, for almost a decade. I was already an adult when they started seeing each other, so I never had much of a relationship with her. That said, Sasha was nice and thoughtful, though a bit annoying at times, and I never had any problems with her. I now have a husband, 34M, and 2 kids, 9M and 4F. Sasha is very fond of my children. Especially my daughter. That became very suffocating pretty quickly, so we started setting some boundaries. She never overstepped them. In January, my father and Sasha decided to go on a trip to Disney World, and invited us to join them. We decided to go to celebrate our son's 9th birthday. I quickly regretted coming along. Sasha spent the entire trip fussing over my daughter in ways that overstepped almost every boundary we'd set. Examples include, Sasha bought a mini ears tiara. She wanted me to buy my daughter an identical one so they could match. My daughter didn't like the tiara, so I bought her a Donald Duck hat instead. Sasha got her the tiara anyway, and was upset that she didn't want to wear it. My father and Sasha went shopping in between parks. I told them not to buy my kids anything, as we still had shopping to do and didn't want to risk making our bags too heavy. Still, Sasha returned with 5 bags of clothing for my daughter, and 2 for my son, saying she couldn't resist it. My daughter wanted a Belle costume to wear at the parks, as that's her favorite princess. Sasha tried to convince us to get her an Ariel costume instead, because that's her favorite. I explained that we never watched The Little Mermaid at home because my daughter is scared of Ursula. Sasha insisted on taking dozens of pictures with my daughter in front of the castle at Magic Kingdom. She also took some with my son, but not nearly as many. She tried to convince us to take our daughter to Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique. We refused because the prices are crazy and we'd already bought her the Belle costume. She offered to pay, but we held our ground. I later found out Sasha tried to make a reservation anyway, but there was no availability. When we took our daughter to Slinky Dog Dash, her first roller coaster, Sasha tried to sit next to her. My daughter wanted to sit with me, so we switched. She tried to do the same thing in other attractions. At the Muppets Theater, she tried to get my daughter to sit in her lap. Sasha also tried to pick her up while we met some of the characters. There were more instances. The final straw for me, however, was the last park day of the trip. We were at Magic Kingdom. My husband suffered a minor injury and I had to take him to the first aid station. The kids wanted to go to the Peter Pan ride, so my dad and Sasha offered to take them in the meantime. However, according to my father, the line was too long. So instead, Sasha suggested the Little Mermaid ride, assuring my kids Ursula wasn't on it. Actually, there's a pretty big Ursula animatronic there. My daughter was still sobbing and hugging her brother when we reunited. When we flew back home, I told my father that we'd no longer take our children on trips with Sasha due to her behavior. He got extremely angry. He said his wife loved my kids, thought about what they'd like to do at every moment of the trip and that we should be grateful to have her in our lives. I lost my temper at that. I told him Sasha was a fucking creep, and that they should be grateful I was still okay with them even seeing my children after her actions during the trip. We ended up having a huge fight after that. It's been weeks since we returned home, and my father is still angry at me and my husband. Sasha has texted me a few times. She says she's sorry if she made me uncomfortable, but that she loves my kids and hoped to use the trip to spend more time with them. To be honest, I don't think I'm the here. But I do think I might have overreacted. I believe there's a chance Sasha's actions were motivated by love and she truly did have good intentions. AITA. Update. Hey everyone, I'm ready to give you an update. I read your comments and came to the following conclusion. As much as Sasha's behavior towards my children angered me and freaked me out, calling her a creep was the wrong reaction to have. That said, I think it's best for my family to distance itself from Sasha for the time being. And at the very least, my previous decision to avoid future trips with her based on the Disney trip is still the best course of action. Sasha's pushiness, tendency to override my and my husband's parenting and blatant favoritism towards my daughter were much worse when the kids were younger. After my daughter's birth, she began to focus too much attention on her and almost none on my son. I gave more examples of that in the comments on my original post. That's the reason we set boundaries in the first place. Her fixation on my daughter also bothers me. When we had the boundary conversation with my father and Sasha, she told us that she'd always wondered what having a daughter would be like. She'd also defined herself as child-free before, so I was never certain what to think of that. Either way, that reassured me and my husband that we were doing the best for our kids. Those boundaries had never been overstepped. Then we went on the Disney trip and most of them were completely ignored. Many of you pointed out that she might have gotten carried away, or that Disney is exciting and she wanted to make sure my kids had the best experience, etc. There are 2 things I'll say to that. The first is that whatever Sasha's reasons were, she still overstepped our boundaries. When we first set those, we told her that doing so would have consequences. Disney or not, I don't see a reason to make an exception. Secondly, she wasn't trying to ensure my kids had the best experience. She was pushing them to fulfill her fantasy of what their Disney trip should look like. She repeatedly ignored my children's wishes in favor of her own, despite them both being very clear about what they wanted and didn't want. Sasha also continually favored my daughter, including during my son's birthday, and fussed over her in ways that made her uncomfortable. And I still haven't forgiven the Little Mermaid thing. My daughter is a bit shy and takes a while to open up to most people, so knowing her trust was broken like that angers me in ways I can't describe. To put it in simpler terms, my children aren't props. And whoever treats them as such will, at the very least, be put in timeout. I called my father and Sasha on Saturday. I apologized for calling Sasha a creep, but told them that we needed some time apart. They won't see my family until my younger sister's birthday in late April. If that goes well, they'll be invited to my daughter's 5th birthday party in May. After that, we'll slowly work on re-establishing contact. I also said that if they overstepped our boundaries again, the consequences would be more dire. My father didn't take it well. I don't care. Sasha sent me a text with more apologies, followed by a request to at least FaceTime my kids every now and then. I said no. And to those who said my controlling behavior ruined the trip, my kids had an amazing time at Disney World. They're both still talking about it. My daughter keeps asking us to put her pictures with the characters she met up on the wall, and my son says he had the best birthday ever. I think that's it. Thank you for your advice and support on my first post. Update 2. Last time I posted here, I mentioned that my father and Sasha wouldn't see my children until my younger sister's birthday. The party took place last weekend, and we didn't attend. These 2 months of NC worked fine, but not great. My father respected my wishes, to my surprise, but Sasha kept trying to find ways to talk to my children. She'd call me under the guise of needing to ask me something, only to later say, "By the way, are the kids around? I want to say hi." Every time she tried that, I'd remind her of what I'd told her back in March. This must have happened almost a dozen times, which was enough for my husband and I to start debating on skipping the party. After speaking to our kids, we decided not to go. They both said they missed my father, but clearly didn't want to see Sasha. We thought about attending and just distancing them from her while there, but risking making our children uncomfortable wasn't worth it. My son even asked if we could see their aunt somewhere else, without Sasha around. My husband and I explained the situation to my sister. She was upset, but mostly because she hadn't seen the kids in a while. We all went to dinner at her favorite restaurant the day after her party. I also called my father and told him we wouldn't go to the birthday party. He reacted better than I expected, but we still had a short fight about it. He claimed that I had promised we'd let Sasha see the kids after 2 months, called me unfair and said he was entitled to have a relationship with his grandchildren. I immediately denied that. Though I tried to sugarcoat it at first, I eventually gave him the truth. My kids don't want to see his wife, and I won't force them to. My father and I had a long talk. I told him how much Sasha's actions at the Disney trip upset my children, as well as how uncomfortable me and my husband felt. I admitted I don't trust his wife at all, and I don't think I ever truly will. He said that while he still thought I was overreacting, he understood I wanted to protect my kids. My dad also told me about how these 2 months of NC were for them. Apparently, Sasha started talking about my kids, mostly my daughter, a lot more than usual. She'd mention things and places she thought they would like. My father was aware of one of the times she called me, but thought it was a one-time thing. She wanted to give my daughter a gift at my sister's birthday party. He said he didn't know why. At one point, she told him she wanted to plan another family vacation with the kids, even though I told them they're not traveling with Sasha anymore. Learning all of that just made me more certain that I can't trust this woman around my children. For now, I intend to remain LC with my father and NC with Sasha. My daughter told me she wanted her grandpa at her birthday party a few weeks from now, so I told him that he was invited, but Sasha wasn't. He agreed. To be honest, I don't trust my father after all of this. I'm allowing him to come because that party will take place at my home, which is easier for me to control. If he tries to bring Sasha, they'll both be kicked out, and it will take a long time for me to consider letting him near my kids again. My father hasn't told me how his wife is reacting to this. My sister told me that during her party, Sasha asked her to tell me she wanted to talk. I'm not reaching out to her, nor do I plan to respond if she attempts to contact me. Both me and my husband have blocked her. My children are doing great. They still talk about how much fun they had at Disney. My daughter's been saving money, putting coins in her piggy bank, for us to go back. On a completely different note, I'm pregnant again. This was completely unplanned. I always said I wanted 2 kids at most, and the third would have to be a huge accident. But my husband and I are ecstatic. I'm still in the first trimester, so not a lot of people know. We're brainstorming ways to tell our kids. Overall, I'm happy with my life right now. And as much as I wish this Sasha situation had never happened, I feel like a better parent after dealing with it. I have never been more confident in my abilities to protect my children than I am now. I don't think I'll update again anytime soon. Once again, thank you for all the support you've given me. I wish you the best. Update 3, September 3rd, 2024, 7 months later. First of all, my father didn't bring Sasha to my daughter's birthday party back in May. I didn't really think he would. I'd made it very clear I wouldn't tolerate that, but I'd be lying if I said your comments didn't make me a little paranoid. Secondly, I've just entered my 3rd trimester, and the baby will be here in November. The kids are ecstatic. I'm having another girl, but my husband and I are not sharing the sex until she's born. This has nothing to do with our families, it's just something we've also done with our first 2. Everyone, including Sasha, knows I'm pregnant. We announced it a couple months ago. I had no problem with my father telling her, though he did ask if he could. I didn't hear much about her reaction, but according to my father, she was happy for me. My children still don't want to see Sasha, and I'm still not forcing them to. I've unblocked her and put her on mute instead, but she hasn't made any attempts to contact me. We've continued meeting my father without his wife, and I think it's been working out. My relationship with him isn't fantastic, but it's much better than it was earlier this year. Last week, I saw Sasha for the first time in months. My cousin threw a party at her place. My husband and I attended, as did my father and Sasha. I knew she'd be there, but since the kids weren't with us, son had a sleepover, daughter stayed with my mom, I didn't really have anything against seeing her. They arrived sometime after we did. My husband and I spoke with them for a few minutes, and it was less awkward than I expected. Sasha asked me about the baby's sex, and I told her we weren't telling anyone, which, again, is what we've always done. About 20 minutes later, my father told me they had to go. I thought it was weird that they were leaving so soon, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He called me a few days ago and we spoke for a long time. My father is difficult to talk to, so the following is what I gathered from the conversation. He said they left early because Sasha was holding back tears after she saw me. She was sobbing by the time they got to the car. They later had a discussion about it, and Sasha admitted she wanted kids. She married my dad knowing he didn't but hoped he would change his mind. Apparently, when my son was born, Sasha tried to drop "I want one" hints to my father. He didn't notice it, so she gave up. According to my father, Sasha told him she loved my kids equally, but my daughter was special, because she always imagined herself as a girl mom. That's also the reason why she became such a suffocating presence when my daughter was a baby. When my husband and I started setting boundaries, Sasha realized she was overstepping and agreed to abide by them. To her credit, I think she did a mostly okay job back then, but the favoritism was still obvious enough that my son noticed it. The trip we took was a turning point because Sasha's dream of having a daughter included taking her to Disney World and having her do all the things she liked to do there when she was young. She told my father that having my daughter there was so exciting that she forgot everything I'd said about not overstepping. Sasha wanted a mother-daughter trip and tried to use my child for it. Sasha said she regretted her actions during the Disney trip, but only because she lost access to my children due to them. And seeing me at the party, all pregnant and pretty, my father's words, not sure she actually said that, was what drove her over the edge. I remember reading some comments theorizing that this was what was going on, but I still didn't really expect this. My father said he was telling me all this because his wife wasn't doing well, and he'd understand if I wanted to keep my kids away from her. Didn't expect that, either. I don't know what the future of their relationship will be, and I don't think my father does either. All I know is that if Sasha still wants to have kids, it almost definitely will not be with my father. Before all this, I was pondering about my 3rd child's future in relation to Sasha. Now, I sincerely don't want her to be a part of my baby's life. This isn't a final decision, but I've been speaking to my husband about it, and he agrees with me. I don't think she's a bad person. I got some baby stealer comments on my previous update, but I don't think that's what's happening here either. But if the Disney trip proved anything to me, it's that Sasha is willing to be extremely selfish and disrespectful to get what she wants, even when my kids are involved. A couple months ago, my husband and I had a conversation with our son about the subject. He told us he dislikes Sasha for 2 reasons. She favors his sister and she doesn't listen to them. Honestly, that's all I need to know. Looking back at my own childhood, I feel like I was never allowed to have boundaries. I was always expected to put my schedules and preferences aside for others. It's important to me that my children don't go through that. If they don't want to see Sasha, they don't have to. I think that's all I want to say here. I'm doing well. I actually got some great news from work recently. My kids are thriving, and I'm excited to meet my third baby. Again, thank you guys. Update 3, new update. November 23, 2024, 9 months later. I'm happy to announce my daughter was born 2 weeks ago. She arrived a little earlier than expected, but she's perfect. My older kids are in love with their baby sister. And as much as I didn't plan to have a third child, I am truly glad I did. As I mentioned the last time I posted, my husband and I didn't announce the sex in advance when our first 2 kids were born. This time, I decided to give my father a heads up. After I found out about the whole girl mom thing, I became worried about how Sasha would react to the news I was having another daughter. Telling my father ahead of her birth would give him more time to prepare. So about a month ago, my father told Sasha I was having another girl. As expected, she didn't take it well. A few days after I gave birth, my father told me that he and Sasha were separating. They're not sure about divorce, but he thinks that's where they're headed. Sasha started talking to my father about having children around the time I made my last post. According to him, they started fighting about it when she tried to convince him to get his vasectomy reversed. I didn't know he had one. My father said Sasha cried when he told her I'd have another daughter, and they decided to separate a few days later. I'm not very informed about the situation, but my father did state that the decision was mutual. About a week ago, Sasha texted me. It started with her congratulating me for my daughter's birth, then evolved into what seemed like a farewell letter to my children. Not much about them stood out to me, though "you'll never understand the love I feel for your children" was an interesting statement. She talked about how much it hurt to know she'd never meet my baby, or watch my daughter become a big sister. Sasha told me I had tortured her by keeping my kids away, and it was that distance that made her accept she needed to be a mother. She deleted the text a few minutes after I finished reading it. I decided not to reply. I haven't been thinking much about the situation lately, but the more I do, the dumber I feel for not realizing Sasha wanted kids sooner. I remember she started talking about my father's future grandchildren long before I got pregnant with my son. Her behavior around my daughter, at least before the Disney trip, always felt weird to me, but I still never made the connection. I still don't dislike Sasha, but I think she brought this situation upon herself. As much as I recognize my father is far from innocent, he's always been very clear about not wanting more children. Sasha is 47 years old, and while I don't think I'd want to have kids at that age, I know people who have. If that's what she wants, then I wish her luck. We're also officially moving to Europe in 2025. The work-related news I mentioned in my previous update were really, really great. My husband and I had been hoping for an opportunity like this for a while. We're helping the kids make arrangements to maintain contact with their friends. Luckily, my daughter's best friend is my goddaughter. This will be my last update. I'm busy with my baby, and I'll definitely have a busy 2025 as well, so I don't intend to write about this anymore. I want to thank you all for the advice, reassurance, and kindness you have shown me.